Jamuna Tiravanachari. Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Jaya Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Govinda Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda. Jaya Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radhe. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki Nantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai Gaura Premanandi. Okay, so we're reading from 3rd Canto, Chapter 14, text 37 and 38. So I'll just read the Sanskrit for 37. There's no purport and translation, and then together we can chant 38. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Maitreya Vacha Svarsargas Yashi Samlokam Ashashanam Pravepatim Nivritta Sandhya Niyamo Bharyam Aha Prajapatihi. Translation. Maitreya said, the great sage Kasyapa thus addressed his wife, who was trembling because of fear that her husband was offended. She understood that he had been dissuaded from his daily duties of offering evening prayers, yet she desired the welfare of her children in the world. Text 38, so we can chant this together. Kasyapa uvacha prayatyad atmanaste doshan mahurtikad uta man nideshati charena devanam chatihelanat. Kasyapa uvacha apratyatyad atmanaste doshan muhurtikad uta man nidesh aticharena devanam chatihelanat. Kasyapa uvacha apratyatyad atmanaste Doshan Mahurtikad Uta Manidesh Aticharena Devanam Chatihelanat. Please chant. Kashyapa Chaitanya, you want to chant? Harji? Yeah, say. So, synonyms. Kasyapa Uvacha. The learned Brahmana Kasyapa said, Aprayatyat, because of the pollution. Atmanaha, of the mind. Te, your. Doshat, because of defilement. Mahurtikat, in terms of the moment. Uta, also. Mat, my. Nidesha, direction. Aticharena, being too neglectful. Devanam, of the demigods. Cha, also. Atihelanat, being too apathetic. Translation. The learned Kasyapa said, because of your minds being polluted, because of defilement of the particular time, because of your negligence of my directions, and because of your being apathetic to the demigods, everything was inauspicious. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The conditions for having good progeny in society are that the husband should be disciplined in religious and regulative principles, and the wife should be faithful to the husband. In Bhagavad Gita 7:11, it is said that sexual intercourse according to religious principles is a representation of Krishna consciousness. Before engaging in sexual intercourse, both the husband and the wife must consider their mental condition, the particular time, the husband's direction, and obedience to the demigods. According to Vedic society, there is a suitable auspicious time for sex life, which is called the time for Garbhadhan. Didi neglected all the principles of scriptural injunction, and therefore, although she was very anxious for auspicious children, she was informed that her children would not be worthy to be the sons of a Brahmana. There is a clear indication herein that a Brahmana's son is not always a Brahmana. Personalities like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu were actually born of Brahmanas, but they were not accepted as Brahmanas because their fathers did not follow the regulative principles for their birth. Such children are called demons or Rakshasas. There were only 1 or 2 Rakshasas in the previous ages due to negligence of the disciplinary methods, but during the age of Kali, there is no discipline in sex life. How then can one expect good children? Certainly, unwanted children cannot be a source of happiness in society. But through the Krishna consciousness movement, they can be raised to the human standard by chanting the holy name of God. That is the unique contribution of Lord Chaitanya to human society. Everybody please chant together. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurundina Taranam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so yeah, it's quite a heavy purport. A lot of information packed in there, so try and unpack it and go through it. So the first thing that I thought when reading this purport was in the beginning where Prabhupada is saying, so in Bhagavad Gita 7:11 it said that sexual intercourse according to religious principles is a representation of Krishna consciousness. So I was like, wow, that's a pretty far out statement. And then I was thinking of, what do you say, balancing it or equating or justifying it with another statement that Prabhupada said, which you have to, I guess we have to take into consideration when statements like this come up in Shastra, that is very specific. Intercourse according to religious principles. So Krishna says in that verse, Bhagavad Gita 7:11, Balam balavatam chaham kamaraga vivarjitam dharma virodo bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava. That I am strength of the strong, devoid of passion and desire, and I am sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles, O Lord of the Bharatas, Arjuna. And Prabhupada clearly states in that purport, sex life according to religious principles, dharma, should be for the propagation of children, not otherwise. The responsibility of parents is then to make their offspring Krishna conscious. So I was thinking that, I've heard from quite a few devotees, even some quite senior devotees, that, Kali Yuga, it's so difficult just to stay married, so just, take it easy, just, you can have as much sex as you want just with your wife, you don't have to worry about this or that, if it's, for children or not for children, just, don't be a fanatic, that kind of thing. But everywhere in Shastra where we read statements like this, is quite clear that it's directly for propagation of children. It's, because otherwise sex life is very contaminating, very polluting for the mind and for the heart. It said in one place in Bhagavatam that it's like a knot. It tightens the knot in the heart. So, but of course, if someone is engaging sex life in Krishna's service, in devotion to Krishna, but that's quite a high thing, then the knot actually is not, you could say, so tightly, so much tightened. But this was an interesting thing, that of course sex life can be engaged in Krishna service like any other thing, like we hear yukta vairagya muchyate. But one has to be very careful and expert, particularly with things like this that are so closely entwined with our animal nature of the body. Because we have these eating, sleeping, mating, defending, these are all actually animalistic propensities. So we have to be very careful when trying to engage, particularly sex life. It's described that's the most difficult thing to give up, or the most tightly bound thing with the nature of the body and the mind. So, also because in the conditioned state, the mind is just like a caged animal, so it's wild, and it's quite crazy. But just for now, like for example, right now, my mind's not so bad. It's feeling kind of focused, pretty calm, that kind of thing. But as soon as we go out to Washington Square Park or wherever, doing kirtan, and there's all these crazy people running around, and a lot of madness going on, then the mind becomes quite agitated. It becomes, it can very easily revert to its base animal nature. So, the mind can very easily, just like a caged animal, can very easily turn on the intelligence. We have to be careful. We have to be very careful to keep it under control and steadily keep it engaged in devotional service many different ways. Like I like Vaisheshika Prabhu's saying of the no-gap philosophy. So there's always gaps in our days. There's always little holes Maya can enter and contaminate the mind, contaminate the intelligence. But if we try and follow this program of having no gaps, meaning whenever you have a space, whenever you have a free time, always try and fill it up with some form of devotional service, with chanting japa or reading a purport or a new shloka that you're learning, revising old shlokas, things like that. It's very helpful for keeping up that barrier, keeping up your spiritual armor, you could say. And So, I was reading, and when I was thinking about this verse, or this part of the purport, I was meditating on it and trying to delve a little deeper into it. Because one could very easily just read that statement that sex life according to religious principles or dharma, that's Krishna consciousness. That's like, directly Krishna consciousness. But we can say that about anything. For example, my chanting of kirtan, that's directly Krishna conscious. That's one of the 5 most important activities in devotional service. But also we have to, balance it by understanding, okay, but what is my motivation behind my chanting? Am I chanting really just for Krishna's pleasure? Is it completely pure, free, anya bilashita shunyam? Is it free from all other desires? Or am I doing this for Krishna, but I also have some reason for doing it? I also have some personal nature or some personal tendency, desire that I'm also engaging. So that's something very interesting, because it made me think, of course, in the material world we may engage our desires or our nature in Krishna service, but until the point where we're completely pure, it's always mixed. There's always a, even though we may be trying our best with best intentions, there's always a one for Krishna, one for me philosophy. So there's always that slight tinge of selfish desire, but the goal, what we actually want to achieve, and we should strive for, and we always do experience little pockets of it, like particularly days like we just had Jamashtami and Vyas Puja, when you really give yourself 100%, just surrender, don't care, I haven't chanted my rounds, haven't done this, didn't get to take enough rest, whatever it is. You really give yourself, you experience glimpses of higher stages of devotional service. So the goal is actually not to engage our propensity or our desires in Krishna's service, but the real goal is to make Krishna's service our only desire, to make our nature and our natural habit, our instinct, is that whatever is pleasing to Krishna, whatever will give him the highest happiness, that should be my natural instinct, my natural habit. And everything else is distasteful, naturally. So that should be our goal, and we can work towards that. And I came across an interesting statement in Shyam Sundar Prabhu's Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, Part 2, which I remembered when I was reading this statement, that because Shyam Sundar and Prabhupada at that time, they were, what were they doing? I believe Shyam Sundar was trying to do some kind of business, but it was shady, but he was using the temple's money and investing it in a project which was kind of like gambling. But Prabhupada said it was like, okay, for this one time you can do it. So, it was a risky job, and of course it's not exactly, it's pushing the limit of gambling, breaking all the regular principles. So, but then he asked if he could do it another time. Prabhupada said, no, it's better you not. And he said something very interesting. He said, you have to know how to catch the big fish without getting wet. And that's the business of an expert devotee. So what that means basically is to be able to engage with the material nature in such close proximity, or such, you could say, things that are trigger points for our nature, for our conditioning in the material body, material mind, without becoming contaminated. You have to be quite expert, you have to be qualified, and that's particularly why we have the title Adhikari, for one who's qualified to get married, one who's qualified to beget Krishna-conscious children, and have a stable household life. That is actually really important service that the spiritual master can ask for the disciple. And in some ways, actually, one who's adhikari, one who is a qualified householder, they're much more renounced than a brahmachari or I don't know if we could say sannyasi, because they're generally supposed to have renounced all desire for sex or desire, selfish desire. But they're actually in a higher stage of renunciation. If one can engage everything in the material world in Krishna service, rather than rejecting it or giving up, that's renunciation through utilization. So, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of course we know, has said that if he could produce Krishna conscious children and make them pure Vaishnavas, then he would engage in sexual intercourse hundreds of times. But he said, but in this age of Kali, it's very difficult. Therefore, I remain in the renounced order. I remain a brahmachari. So, but there are some devotees who can do it, and they've got very wonderful children. Like some of us might know Tukaram Prabhu in California. He's got 7 children now, and it seems like they're doing pretty well. All very much engaged in devotional service and preaching, chanting. So yeah, it's actually a wonderful thing. And I was just curious of the meaning of Garbhadhan, so I researched it and the breakdown. I found it, I'm just curious if you know. So you know the word for word breakdown? Exactly. Yeah, so Garbha is meaning the process of receiving, the process of giving. So it's a very scientific process, yeah. Actually, we're inviting a particular kind of consciousness into the womb of the mother. So you have, a lot of responsibility, and also it's one's choice what kind of consciousness or what kind of soul that they want to invite. So we see with Diti, everything was inauspicious, everything was out of place. And, because of momentary weakness of the mind, weakness of the heart, and succumbing to the desires of lust, then she had to give birth to Ravana and Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, who were very inauspicious, caused her great suffering later on when they died, or were killed by Vishnu. So, before undergoing an action, it's very important to meditate and actually plan out the goal that you want to achieve and the process that you'll have to achieve it, the consciousness that goes into it. So that's the whole process of Garbhadhan. Okay. So later in the purport, Prabhupada's talking about that this point of even though there may be unwanted progeny in the world, as of now there isn't really anything that we can do. We can't just go around and kill all the unwanted progeny, because that would mean 99% of the world. So that's not a viable solution until the end of Kali Yuga, when Lord Kalki comes. But what can we do to help the situation? So what we can do is that we can help raise human society to the human standard of life. And Prabhupada says, how do you do that? By giving Krishna consciousness, giving God consciousness. And particularly in this age of Kali, that means by giving them the holy name, by engaging them in chanting the holy name. Then the heart actually becomes purified, becomes clean, more clean, depending on how pure the chanting is. And one can come up to the stage of civilized life, of human life. So I had experience of that, personally, before coming to Krishna consciousness. Now looking back, you see wow, it really was animal life, just 4 basic principles: eating, sleeping, mating, defending, no peace of mind, not much higher thoughts other than just mundane subjects of the material world. So, this is a very powerful method, chanting of the holy name, chanting of sacred pastimes of Krishna, which also made me think of this verse that you probably all know. We can chant together, those who know it. Bhagavatam 11.3.30. Paranukatanam Pavanam Bhagavadvasaha Mitoratir Mitastushtir Nivritir Mita Atmanaha. So it's a very nice verse. One should learn how to associate with the devotees of the Lord by gathering with them to chant the glories of the Lord. This process is most purifying. As devotees thus develop their loving friendship, they feel mutual happiness and satisfaction. And by thus encouraging one another, they are able to give up material sense gratification, which is the cause of all suffering. So that's a very nice translation. And the purport, I'll just read the first little part of it. It's really nice. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, those who are advanced in Krishna consciousness should not envy one another or quarrel among themselves. Giving up all such mundane feelings, they should gather together and chant the glories of the Supreme Lord for mutual purification. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has pointed out that glorification of the Supreme Lord is especially potent when performed in the association of pure devotees. When devotees engage in Sankirtan, chanting the glories of the Lord together, they experience the highest transcendental bliss and satisfaction. Thus they encourage one another to give up material sense gratification, which is based on illicit sexual connections with women or men. One devotee will say to another, "Oh, you have given up sense gratification? Starting today, I shall also give it up." So we all have that practical experience. When you see someone else is really fired up in kirtan, it makes you very fired up in kirtan. Like particularly Hadai Pran, I see when yesterday in Gaurarti, he just starts like jumping, and he's like so big, he's just got like so much energy, kind of influences the whole crowd around him. So it's it's a very nice process, the Sankirtan Yagya, that when we get together and you just really put your heart into it, put your mind into it, your full consciousness, then we gain that higher taste, we gain that higher pleasure, and then it becomes very easy to give up all of our lower conditionings, all of our lower natures. Sometimes before going into kirtan, the mind is very disturbed. It's thinking about all these different things based on, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Oh, I'm so hungry, or I can't digest that food that I ate, or, someone said something very painful, or some not properly dressed people, and it was disturbing for the mind, whatever it is. But then, Ramana Prabhu comes in and before you know it, you're not, your mind is completely focused, and the kirtan is completely, it's like swept away. So this is the most important for us process of controlling the mind, is chanting the holy name and engaging the mind and thinking about Krishna in that way, because we're not qualified, at least speaking for myself, I'm not qualified for dhyan or ashtanga or these different processes of yoga, which are very difficult, require so many steps just to come up to them. And the mind is just too agitated, the mind is not focused enough to practice these things. So I was also thinking on this point of Lord Chaitanya's unique contribution to human society, being Sankirtan Yagya, that I was hearing something very interesting in Radhika Raman Prabhu's seminar on, I was listening to a few. I think this was his seminar on Tattva Sandarbha, but somehow or other the point came up of ahimsa. And he was saying that it's mentioned that for human beings, in relation to animals, all other species of life below human beings, that the way that the human shows ahimsa is by non-violence, literally direct non-violence. It's very easy to understand. So for cows, for goats, for trees, for whatever fish, the way that we can show compassion, the way that we can show ahimsa is just by being nonviolent, just by not harming them physically or mentally or whatever. But for those in the human species of life, ahimsa is actually different. It's of a different nature. Yes, it means also being physically nonviolent, but ahimsa in the human form of life means that you have to give God consciousness. You have to actually help them come to the goal of the human form, which is emancipation, going back to Godhead, or at least achieving a better spiritual position than they're in now. So I was thinking, well, that's an interesting statement, because, why is that? Well, if you think about it, if you see someone, as once you come to Krishna consciousness, then you get somewhat of spiritual vision, by the mercy of the spiritual master and the devotees, you get divya gyan, you get divine knowledge by which you can perceive the world in a spiritual way. So then if you see, unfortunate non-devotees who are suffering, who are bound up in the network of Maya, then it's almost as if they're like on a cliff. They're blindfolded and they're on the edge of a cliff. And, they're very close to falling off. So if you're seeing that, and you're just like, oh, whatever, just, let them fall off. Actually, it is a form of violence. It's impassive violence. You're not pushing them off, but if we just let them fall off, if we just let them die, if we just let them suffer like that, and we choose not to help them, then it actually is a form of violence on our behalf. So for those of us in the Krishna consciousness movement who have received the mercy of the parampara, who have received divine knowledge by which we can perceive what is illusion, what is reality, what is falling off the cliff, meaning going back down into animal species of life, it is actually our duty to help bring, the blindfolded, insane, conditioned souls that we once were suffering in the same position, to bring them and try and help them come back to a sane reality, a sane position of life. So I think we can, if there's any comments or questions at this point, we can go there so we don't go over time. Hey, Prabhu. One sec, we just have a microphone system. If you don't say it in the mic, it doesn't count. Mostly for the online watchers and the kitchen watchers.
12 online.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for that. Is it working?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you for the class.
Thank you.
It was very nice. About this last point about how it's our duty to help the conditioned souls as we have something, we need to give it away. What is the role, if you could just speak a little bit about, what's the role of the devotee in bestowing Krishna's mercy? Because I think from my perspective, I'm not able to give Krishna consciousness, so well, basically. So what is the role of the devotee? Because, one could argue that, Krishna will just do what he wants. He's the supreme controller of the world. So maybe, he doesn't want to save this devotee, or this soon-to-be devotee, basically. Because,
right.
So what is my role in it?
Well, the main thing we can do is get out of the way. Because actually Krishna very, very rarely actually gives bhakti himself. There's extremely rare circumstances where he actually gives devotion himself to a person. But from bhakti comes bhakti. So the devotee or the bhakta is the one who gives bhakti. So you and Arjun Prabhu and Jayananda and Devyangi Mataji, all of You are the ones who actually can engage people in devotional service. Krishna won't do it personally, almost always. Very, very rare exceptions. So we're more or less like a gateway for that mercy, that current of mercy to flow through. So the main thing we can do is just to get out of the way, just to put aside all of our misgivings or shortcomings or weaknesses or hesitations, things like that, and really just try to act as an instrument, So that, of course, is a very general answer, because acting as an instrument, that can come in many different ways. But the basic principle is just to try and surrender oneself to whatever Krishna's will is. And you feel that particularly when you do book distribution, and if you're having a really good day where you've done strong sadhana, you've chanted your 16 rounds very attentively all at one point, you've read before you go out, you've not wasted any time that day, you've really engaged yourself sufficiently, then that mercy very easily can flow through. There's not many blockages. Whereas if you have kind of iffy day, and things didn't go so well, you didn't get good rest the night before, whatever it is, then it's not that the mercy has changed. It's not that Radharani, Bhakti Shakti, is not present, but it's that our blockages are there. Our floodgates, I guess you could say, have come up a little bit more. So, is that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? Divyangi Mataji.
Thank you for the nice class.
Hare Krishna.
I was appreciating the point that when the mind can be very disturbed, and like you were given this example, when you go to the kirtan, then everything becomes not as bad as I thought before. And something what His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu wrote in his book, "Your seva will save you." So it's
that's such a nice point.
At this point, it can be any service, right? The main idea is just be engaged in service. And I actually wanted to tell this story. His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj was telling, you might know it, this story, when he was kind of one of the managerial positions he had in one of the temples in India, I don't remember which one. He had this conversation with Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada asked him to organize 24-hour kirtan, like every day or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then Maharaj said, well, it was like a transcendental bargaining.
Yeah.
And he said, well, it can be hard, Srila Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada said, maybe like a few days a week or something. Or only temple devotees can be engaged, something like that. And then Maharaj said, well, it still can be hard because, they all do service, and, they can be tired and too much engaged in the temple. And then he said, okay, once a week, Sunday. So the Sunday was 24-hour kirtan every Sunday. And Maharaj said that he noticed how just being in this kirtan for some time, or even like for many hours, all the problems, they would disappear. Like Krishna would make arrangements. And he would say, if someone comes up to him on Wednesday, and gives him a problem, like, oh, what am I supposed to do with this problem? He said, oh, let's wait. I'll give you answer on Monday. and by Monday, everything would, the problem would disappear by Krishna's arrangement. So I really appreciate this point. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, that was a great living example. That was, Maybe Prabhu Vishnu Prabhu can institute that. Come to me after the Sunday feast Gaurati and tell me whatever you want. Any problems, I don't care. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare. So I just wanted to share one thing about Govardhan Samskar. So actually, there's a devotee that's been doing extensive research into it and compiled one book and it gives every single detailed mantra, all the things. There's so many different procedures that have to be done. But actually, just to point out, Prabhupada would, he did want devotees to go further into it, but he had originally just said, chant 50 rounds.
Right.
So I'd asked one Prabhupada disciple about this, or he was sharing about his 3 kids. He said for the first one, they did chant the 50 rounds, and like the devotee came out, like that soul, I think it was a daughter they first had, came out, Paka devotee, wanted to engage devotional service and all that. So the second one they didn't. And he just said they came out half-baked devotees. But, I'm not so into Krishna. Except for the third one, again, they did the 50 rounds, and again, Paka devotee. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a spiritually scientific process. Yeah. Anything else? Otherwise, we can.
You were mentioning how, at the beginning of the class, how we should have our desire be not like one for me and one for Krishna, one for Krishna, one for me kind of thing. And I'm wondering, as we advance in devotional service, we're developing a relationship with Krishna, and my understanding of relationships, they don't usually work if it's just one person's like desire.
Right.
So how do we, involve our desires as well as Krishna's in a relationship? So like, we're not going to be like, where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. That's not really helpful. Yeah. So how can we do that?
Well, one thing is that right now what we think our desires are actually not our real desire, because the desire of the soul, that is only to love and to serve and to please Krishna. And therefore, Krishna's only desire is to love and serve and please his devotee. But when I say desire, particularly in this point, I'm referring to our material desires. Like, I'm hungry, okay, and I really want a grilled cheese sandwich. Okay, well then let me offer a grilled cheese sandwich to Krishna. That kind of thing. But now we're all thinking about grill. So, but for the pure soul, their relationship with Krishna is always, I guess you could say they're on the same page. That the soul knows what pleases Krishna, and Krishna knows what pleases them. Ultimately, what that means, by engaging in devotional service, that's the only way to actually achieve the fulfillment of the jiva, the fulfillment of, or happiness of the soul. So, and in that service, actually, there is desire. There's unlimited desire, but completely spiritual, completely for Krishna's pleasure. That, like Narottam Das Thakur, even when he was, I guess you could say, present on earth in his sadhaka rupa, his sadhaka form, practitioner form, but he was engaging in devotional service within his mind as a manjari, as a young maidservant of Srimati Radharani, and he would cook different kinds of milk sweets. That was his service given to him by his spiritual master. He would cook milk sweets for the pleasure of the divine couple to have in their meetings. And so, he would always think about different kinds of milk sweets, different ways to make them, different things like that. And similarly, the gopis are arranging the forest groves in different ways. How can we make it more attractive? Maybe we can do it this way, maybe we can do it that way. Maybe we can, create a flower bed like this, we can create a cottage like this. So we can have, in the pure sense, there is unlimited desire to serve Krishna. And ultimately that's pleasing to the self. So it's like you're giving pleasure to Krishna, but by giving pleasure to Krishna, automatically you're giving pleasure to oneself. So is that sufficient, or you want more of a different angle?
I just wanted to confirm that, like, Krishna's not saying go decorate the flower groves. They're doing it automatically by themselves.
Right, it's their spontaneous desire.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, then the next question is, how do we get can we have this element of, wanting to please Krishna in a specific way in our current non-spontaneous devotional service stage?
Right, that's the orders of the spiritual master, because our mind and our contaminated intelligence are pulling us one way, so the spiritual master has to come with a stick and like beat it back the other way. It's running towards Maya, but the spiritual master has to force us towards Krishna. So the expert spiritual master, he sees what your propensities are, what your inclinations are, and he can engage you in service, even though there may be some mix, because in the beginning there's always, as we were saying, there's always like a tinge of what I want to do, or a tinge of selfish desire. But he'll engage one in devotional service, knowing that by doing the service, by performing the service, by engaging that nature in Krishna's service, it will become purified. And we will come to the stage where whatever I want to do, whatever I like, will become insignificant, and whatever Krishna likes, that will become our nature. That will become our natural instinct, that we just want to do that rather than trying to dovetail what I want to do. So, but in the beginning, everything goes through vidhi, through regulation, and through the order of the spiritual master and his direction. He like kind of puts the blinders on the wild horse of our mind and says, just do that. But when one becomes more and more purified, often the spiritual master gives a little more freedom, and he says, I see you're more mature now. I see that your consciousness is more fixed on considering what's Krishna's satisfaction. So then sometimes he does give more freedom to choose service or choose opportunities and ways to engage. But in the beginning it's often wash the pots, clean the temple room, go out for Harinam, cook for the deities, take the trash out, whatever it is, distribute all these things, which are actually nectar. For one who is more advanced, those are like the building blocks of their spiritual life. Those are the things that give them the greatest joy, the greatest happiness. So even in the most advanced stages of devotional service, one still attends Mangalarti, still distributes books, still performs Harinam, still does all these things, but the consciousness changes. That's the only thing. So, okay, I think we can end here just in 1 minute early for breakfast prasad. Can you believe it? Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Antakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Gauda Premanande. Hari Hari Ba. Tidanam Bhavani.